I've gotten some positive feedback on the last 2 chapters, so I figured I'd go ahead and read the 3rd one for you. So just like before, grab a blanket, a warm drink, listen to this while you study or try and fall asleep. And honestly, in part, this is the easiest way for me to get my wife to sleep at night. So Laura, listen close. If you want more of this, if you like this sort of thing, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and kind of show me that you want this to keep going. Also, if you want to see me write this book, I do it on stream every morning, Monday through Friday. Without further ado, here is Chapter 3 of All Men March to Die. Tell me, Gellin, Standard Marshal Wilcox said, sliding a folded piece of parchment across the table. Do you recognize this? The page was neatly folded in thirds. Someone had spent a great deal of time making sure the complaint was properly formatted, just as the Marshal Code required. Gellin sighed and crossed his legs, carefully angling them to maximize airflow into his coat. The window behind Wilcox was cracked open, but the draft was laughably weak. In the oppressive heat, the Standard Marshal had abandoned any pretense of formality. His crimson coat and cuirass hung limply from an armor stand, leaving him in an unbuttoned tunic and breeches rolled all the way up to the knee. Ahem, Gellin said, shifting in his seat. I'm not quite sure. This, Wilcox tapped the parchment with one thick finger, is an anonymous complaint, addressed to the Royal War Council. Ah, Gellin replied, playing along. Would you mind reading it for me? Wilcox said. Certainly. Gellin cleared his throat. The Standard Marshal couldn't touch him. They both knew it. All this posturing was just a sad little attempt to bully Gellin into backing down. Of course he would not. The council deserved to know how ridiculous things had become at Tabanoki. He traced a finger down the script and read aloud. I am writing the Royal War Council of Darianopel to inform you of an immoral offense against the divine order of man. He paused to look up. Wilcox gave a slight nod, a bead of sweat trailing down his olive temple. Gellin continued, voice rising with faint theatricality. While the position of quartermaster is a sacred trust, he read, I regret to inform you that the current officer overseeing provisions at Fort Tabanoki possesses neither culinary taste or ethical restraint. Wilcox said nothing, just stared. The meat substitute, if it can be called that, Gellin went on, resembles a mixture of gravel and boot glue. The beans arrive dry, the salt is stingy, and the bread, when not outright moldy, is so stale it can be used to patch masonry. He looked up again, eyebrows lifted in smug triumph. Standard Marshal, he added, if you've brought me here to simply recite a formal complaint, I do question whether my time... You forgot the best part, Wilcox interrupted, raising an eyebrow, then flat. If it is not treason to starve your own men slowly, then I fear for the future of our great and noble empire. Wilcox didn't even look at the page. He knew it by heart. A pause. You sent this, Wilcox said finally. The faintest trace of his border folk accent softened the TH in the last word. Gellin's chair creaked as he leaned back and crossed his arms. It constricted airflow somewhat, but that was the price for authority. A sort of discomfort that separated the strong from the weak. A lesson from his father. I may have submitted something along those lines, Gellin admitted. Anonymous, of course, protocol and all. Wilcox stared at him for a moment longer, then exhaled and steepled his hands against his lips, as if praying for divine patience. Gellin, he said, I have men missing limbs, I have scouts who haven't slept in 4 days, I have a shipment of salt stuck 2 cliques north because of mudslides and rebel sappers. And you. He picked up the parchment and waved it. You are writing restaurant reviews to the capital. It's a supply chain concern, Gellin said, folding his arms. I'd think a Standard Marshal would appreciate someone noticing. Oh, I noticed, Wilcox muttered. He leaned forward again, arms on the desk. Do you know how many times I've had to explain you to other officers? You're a full-time apology, Gellin. Every week, I'm out here patching your mess with a shovel and a smile. Gellin gave a brittle laugh. Is that really necessary? No, Wilcox said. "But your father would expect it. You'd have my head if I removed you from your post." Gellin froze, just for a second, and Wilcox let it hang. Then he stood, slowly, walked over to the window and shoved it open. The summer air that poured in was heavy, hot, and thick with dust. "But that doesn't mean I can't make your life a living hell," he said, back still turned. "You're not here to be important. You're here to be useful." Gellin stood too, a bit stiffly, brushing down the front of his coat with the edge of his hand. "I am useful." Wilcox turned to face him. "Then prove it." A long silence followed. Gellin gave a curt nod, then turned toward the door. And Gellin paused, hand on the handle. "If I get another anonymous letter written in your handwriting, I'll personally see you transferred to latrine duty, outer camp, next to the jackal pits." Gellin didn't respond, just adjusted his collar and stepped out. The door clicked shut behind him. Through the wood, he could still hear Wilcox exhale, slow, weary, and mutter to himself. "Moral defense against the divine order of man. Gods, this kid doesn't know what's coming." What did Wilcox know? His father had told him everything about bravery, about honor, about the will of man. The Empire crushed enemies 6-1, held the line for weeks, won with courage alone, not paperwork. All Wilcox knew was the other side of a desk. That's what waited for him out there. Victory, recognition, superiority. If the Standard Marshal was worried about morale, maybe he should train his men better, or feed them better, or keep the damn beans from turning to gravel. Gellin adjusted his collar, jaw tight. Still, he hadn't exactly helped. Wilcox was cleaning up after him again. That wasn't how officers earned respect. A flicker of heat rose in his chest. Shame, something like it, pushed it down. Fine, he'd stop complaining. He'd proved them all wrong. Gellin thought of Florence, of Roan, of anyone who'd ever doubted him. He pictured their faces as he rode past, astride a gleaming stallion, leading the march into another conquered city, one of many, glory enough for a true victor. And then his stomach rumbled. Without thinking, his legs carried him down the steps and out into camp. The officers' lounge might have something edible. Maybe Huckley had finally decided to experiment. Recruits marched in unison nearby, boots chewing in the dirt, their shouts echoing off the barracks. Behind them, the thunder of distant artillery shook the air. Arrows sliced across the sky above the archery range. Men sweated and collapsed in the heat, training until they dropped, or until someone ordered them to stop. Gellin noticed none of it. He passed a few familiar faces and offered the barest of nods. A smile here, a lifted chin there. None of them smiled back. They hadn't seen him. Clearly, if they had, there would be a proper salute. Recognition, respect. That's what he told himself anyway. It was easier than addressing the truth. His arms swung stiffly at his sides as he walked, posture rigid, trying to project authority he didn't quite feel. Eventually, he reached the lounge, a sagging structure of tin and splintered beams, half sunken into the dust. The wood creaked underfoot as if the whole thing could fall on itself at the faintest breeze. Inside, someone was shouting. Officers got into arguments all the time. Gellin wouldn't have thought of much of it, except for the whimper he heard on the other end. "Salt's a preserve, Huckley. You know what it means? It preserves. And yet somehow every shipment that passes through your grubby little hands arrives later than anywhere else in the Empire." Gellin cracked the door and peeked inside. A few torchbearers stood in a loose semicircle, arms crossed, watching Florence dissect Quartermaster Huckley with that signature smile, half charm, half blade. "I'm sorry, sir," Huckley said, measured, though tension rode his shoulders. "The shipment's delayed. I had to lower rations across the board, but I assure you they'll return to normal as soon as the next cart arrives." Wilcox had mentioned it earlier. Rebels on the road, maybe even a hijacking. A nasty problem. Florence tilted his head, voice soft as silk. "You know, in Palaquin, they execute quartermaiters for less. Starvation's a form of sabotage, or maybe, he grinned. You just like watching strong men go soft. Does it give you a thrill, seeing them beg like dogs? Huckley didn't flinch. He stared at the floor, jaw tight, ledger held firmly in both hands. Not afraid, just choosing not to escalate. Knowing his place in the food chain was not anywhere near the top. Gellin, meanwhile, placed a hand on his stomach. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, and Florence had stationed himself right in front of the soup, of course. I thought it better to give everyone a little less than let some go without entirely, Huckley said evenly. Gellin slipped through the door, clicked shut behind him. Florence's eyes flicked over, mildly amused. But he turned back to Huckley, louder now, speaking to his choir. Did you hear that? He thinks he's a philosopher. He plucked the ledger from Huckley's grip and began leafing through it like it bored him. Oh, how convenient. Your name's not listed anywhere near the bottom. I wonder if that's because you're always first in line. Actually, Gellin was first in line. He grabbed a bowl and a stale bread roll from the tray. I'm not even an officer, Huckley said. Florence raised his voice. Anyone here ever see our friend Huckley miss a meal? A ripple of chuckles passed through the room. Florence tossed the ledger aside with a dramatic flair, but Huckley picked it up calmly, tucking it beneath one arm. Excuse me, Gellin said, nudging his bowl down the counter. The laughter stopped. Florence turned, slow, one perfect eyebrow arched. What? Gellin nodded. The soup, you're blocking it. Florence gave a polished, pitying smile. Do we have a problem, pig? Gellin's ears burned. Guess that makes this my trough, so if you kindly just move along. A few torchbearers chuckled. Whether Florence's insult or Gellin's remark, it didn't matter. Gellin chuckled too, just enough to muddy the water. Florence's smile flickered. A dark lock fell across his brow. You think this is funny? No. Gellin reached behind Huckley and dipped the ladle into the pot. I just think it's sad. Florence's jaw twitched. You're yelling at the man who keeps us fed, Gellin said, pouring his soup. Doesn't seem necessary or particularly smart. You don't give orders, Florence snapped. You can't even get your men to listen. Exactly, Gellin said, blowing on a spoonful. Neither does Huckley. He's doing the best he can. If you have a complaint, take it through the proper channels. Florence didn't move. His friend stayed silent. Gellin slurped his soup and locked eyes with him. If you've got a problem with rations, he said, talk to someone who can fix it, not the guy doling out dinner. Florence's nostrils flared. Then, without another word, he turned and strode out, boots echoing against the stone. The room exhaled. Huckley blinked, then nodded once at Gellin in quiet thanks. Gellin shoved his bowl toward him. They were right, though, he said, tearing the bread in half and cramming a piece in his mouth. Could use more salt. Then he grabbed another roll and left to meet his men for a run. The bread sat heavy in his stomach, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly. He hadn't slept, he'd barely eaten, but he could still fight. He could still run. And tomorrow maybe they'd remember his name for something other than a complaint. He told himself that was enough. For now. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you listening in. Hopefully it was relaxing enough for people to fall asleep, or maybe enjoyable enough for people to listen. Please let me know what you think, and if you have any comments, questions, concerns, drop them down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you want any more like this. Once again, make sure you check out the stream if you're wanting to watch me write this or you have any questions about the work. But besides that, hope you have a good day.